Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. I am Dr. Asma Siddiq from Anatomy Department, and today I am going to discuss with you the development of diaphragm in embryology lecture. So you know very well that diaphragm is a muscular partition between the thoracic cavity above and abdominal cavity below. And its gross structure you have already discussed in first year MBBS. So how it is developing, we will discuss today that the diaphragm, it develops by four sources. So there are these four important sources for the development of the diaphragm. Number one is the contribution of the septum transversum. The septum transversum, it forms mainly the central tendon of the diaphragm. There is a muscular ingrowth from the lateral body wall, which is making up most of its costal part, that is along the posterior lateral wall of the diaphragm. This is the posterior lateral costal part of the diaphragm, which is formed by muscular ingrowth from the lateral body wall. Then is the pleuroperitoneal membrane, which is making a bit smaller portion of the diaphragm, but actually this is the one which is filling up a gap between the abdominal and thoracic cavity in pericardio-peritoneal canal, as you have seen in the development of body cavities. And then is the dorsal mesentery of the esophagus, that is very important, as the septum transversum and the pleuroperitoneal membrane, they are going to fuse in midline with the dorsal mesentery of esophagus to filling up all of the gap and making a complete partition between the thoracic and abdominal cavity by formation of this diaphragm. So this dorsal mesentery of esophagus is mainly responsible to form right and left crura of the diaphragm. As you have seen, there was the right and left crura of the diaphragm, which are the crus of the diaphragm, and they are making band-like structures. These are developing embryologically from dorsal mesentery of the esophagus. So you must remember that there are four structures which are responsible embryologically to form a diaphragm. Number one, septum transversum. Number two is the muscular ingrowth from the lateral body wall. Number three, the pleuroperitoneal membrane. And number four is, so first of all is the septum transversum. And this septum transversum, as you know, that this is a thickened splanchnic mesodermal ridge. This is a mass of splanchnic mesodermal tissue which is present initially in the cranial part of the embryo opposite the third, fourth and fifth cervical somite. So that is very important point to note, that it is present against the third, fourth and fifth cervical somites, and definitely it will receive its innervation from these somites. And then at the third week, initially this is a semicircular shelf-like partition which is separating the pericardium above with the midgut below. So actually you can easily say that this is separating the heart from the growing liver below. So that is a septum transversum. Actually the liver tissue also develops in septum transversum. You will study in the development of GIT. So at the fourth week, when there is the cephalocaudal folding, so at that time of the folding, it moves ventrocaudally. It comes to lie ventrally and a bit lower level against that this somite level that comes to lie at a lower level because of the head folding of the embryo, and then here it is forming incomplete partition between thoracic and abdominal cavities. because you have seen that on each side of the esophagus there is the pericardio-peritoneal canals. So posterolaterally there is a gap, a communication which still persists between thoracic and abdominal cavities through the pericardio-peritoneal canals. Then at the 6th week, this is going to expand and growing fast, and it is fusing with the dorsal mesentery of esophagus and pleuroperitoneal membrane to complete that partition as a complete structure of a diaphragm. So by these fusion and by the rapid growth of all these structures, so now you will see here that as you have seen before, that this whole splanchnic mesodermal thickened ridge that you appreciate here, that is the septum transversum. So this septum transversum is also the area where the liver cords, its hepatocyte cells is growing. But here actually this is a partition which is initially present between the pericardial cavity above and the midgut below. That is the area of midgut, which is showing you this connection of the midgut in the umbilical cord through vitelline duct. So in between this ridge is present. So later on, when there is a development of the liver, then this septum transversum is responsible to separate heart above from that liver below. So that's how it is making a partition here between the abdominal cavity below and the thoracic cavity above. So this is the septum transversum. You must remember that is making up the central tendon of the diaphragm. So again, the septum transversum, which is not only making the central tendon of diaphragm, you must remember that this is also participating in formation of the fibrous pericardium. So that's why the fibrous pericardium of the heart, which is along with that central tendon of the diaphragm, this is inseparable. This is inseparable. So these two structures, they are inseparable because they are developing from a same structure embryologically. Number 2, this one which is you have seen was the pleuropericardial fold. When this pleuropericardial fold, it is going to fuse in the midline, it is uniting and meeting here in the center, completing it, making a complete partition between the heart and the lungs. So this is making the pleuropericardial membrane. This is also contributing in the development of the fibrous pericardium, which is making your concept clear, as you have seen in the thorax, that the phrenic nerve, it runs along and it is running inside in the fibrous pericardium, because this is going to be enclosed into pleuropericardial fold, which is also giving some contribution in formation of fibrous pericardium. So that's how these structures are developing. So this septum transversum, very important structure for the development of the central tendon of the diaphragm. Now the next important component is the pleuroperitoneal membrane. And this pleuroperitoneal membrane, you have seen when there is the rapid development of the lungs in the thoracic cavity, which is narrowing down the pericardio-peritoneal canals, as you have seen in the previous class. Then there is the pleural cavity, which also narrows down, but it expands in downwards direction. So during 6th week, these pleuroperitoneal membranes, they expand and fuse with the dorsal mesentery of esophagus and the septum transversum, which is a crescent-like. These are the crescent-like expansion from the lateral body wall, and then this is fusing with the dorsal mesentery of esophagus and septum transversum, separating the pleural cavities from the peritoneal cavity. So you must remember that this pleuroperitoneal membrane, this is also going to contribute in the formation of the diaphragm when it is fusing with the septum transversum and the mesentery, dorsal mesentery of esophagus. So that is making a bit smaller portion, but actually this is helping to filling up that gap which is present between the abdominal cavity and the pleural cavity above through pericardio-peritoneal canal. So here you have seen that this whole structure, that is the septum transversum, and then this is from the dorsolateral body wall. This is the shelf-like, a crescent-like extension of, this is the pleuroperitoneal fold. When this fold fuses with the dorsal mesentery of esophagus, which is this, in which this esophagus is lying, and it is attaching it to the dorsal body wall, that is its mesentery, and this is also fusing ventrally with the septum transversum, and that is now making a complete partition here by filling up that gap of the pericardio-peritoneal canal. So this is complete partition here, which is now separating abdominal and thoracic cavity. So the septum transversum, this pleuroperitoneal membrane, and as well as the dorsal mesentery of esophagus, they are contributing in the development of the diaphragm, along with you can see some of this muscular ingrowth from the body wall. So this is a membranous structure, as you have seen. Pleuroperitoneal membrane is a membranous structure. It is very soon going to replaced by the muscular tissue because of muscular ingrowth from the lateral body wall. So the myogenic cell, they are going to grow into the pleuroperitoneal membrane and converting it into a muscular structure. So that's how you have seen that the central tendon of the diaphragm formed by septum transversum, the muscular posterolateral wall that is going to develop by the pleuroperitoneal membrane, and then muscular ingrowth from the lateral body wall into that membrane, which is replacing that membranous structure to complete a muscular one. And the dorsal mesentery of esophagus here, which is responsible to form these crust of the diaphragm. So there is the right and left crust of these scrura of the diaphragm, making a sling-like structure which is developed by dorsal mesentery of esophagus. They are also holding the esophagus into that esophageal opening. So that's how the diaphragm this is going to develop. So again, I'm repeating for you, this is septum transversum present ventrally, this is pericardio-peritoneal canal, this is filled up by the development of pleuroperitoneal fold, which is moving and expanding along with the expansion and growth of septum transversum, and then it fused together, as well as they are going to fuse with the dorsal mesentery of the esophagus, and that's how this complete partition that is developing, and we label it is a diaphragm. And then you can see this red in color, that is the muscular ingrowth from the body wall, which is replacing the most of part of the pleuroperitoneal membrane and making it the muscular structure. So that's how this is making a complete partition of a diaphragm between the abdomen. So after the development, the very important question that is regarding the innervation of the diaphragm. So as you have seen that the septum transversum, that was also migrating from the area of third, fourth and fifth cervical somite, as well as the myoblast cell and the muscular ingrowth, which is going to pass into and migrating into the diaphragm. This is again from the third, fourth and fifth cervical somite region. And I hope you know that the nerve which is derived from the ventral rami of the third, fourth and fifth cervical somite, its spinal nerve, that is going to form the phrenic nerve. So this is the phrenic nerve actually, which is responsible to innervate the diaphragm. So most of the diaphragm is going to be replaced by this is innervated by the phrenic nerve. So this is the phrenic nerve having the root value C3, C4 and C5, and that is same as the myoblast cells migrating into the diaphragm. So the muscular portion of most of its portion is getting the innervation from this phrenic nerve. So this nerve also elongates as it follows the descent of the diaphragm. So initially the diaphragm, it is going to developing as the septum transversum is at this area, then this is migrating and descending down in such a way that in the 6th week it is going to reach at the thoracic vertebral level. This is going to reach towards the thoracic vertebra. So it is moving down and it is migrating caudally, and at the 8th week of development, it is reaching at the level of the first lumbar vertebra. So in that video which I have shared you have seen the descent of the diaphragm as well, in which you have seen due to the rapid growth of the vertebral column. Actually, the vertebral column, it is having a growth, very rapid growth, due to which the diaphragm, it descends down, reaching till from the cervical region it descends down to the thoracic region and then to the lumbar L1 region. So there is helping in the elongation of the phrenic nerve as well. So that nerve which is arising from 3rd, 4th and 5th cervical somite region, then this is becoming longer to reach till the diaphragm, which is now locating at L1, first lumbar vertebra. So both motor and sensory supply of the diaphragm is derived from the phrenic nerve, and the part of the nerve which is along the lateral body wall, some of its sensory supply is also through the lower 6 intercostal nerve. So the area that is along the lateral body wall, that is the costal area, it receives its sensory innervation from the lower 6 intercostal nerve. So there are certain anomalies associated with the diaphragm. So these are now definitely whenever there is a defect in the partitioning and formation of the structures which are making diaphragm, then this is leading to that gap, and this gap is responsible for the structure to pass into the thoracic cavity. So this can be the congenital diaphragmatic hernia, this is the congenital hiatal hernia, the parasternal or retrosternal hernia, which are because of the gap and the defects in the structure forming the diaphragm. And if there is that pleuroperitoneal membrane, it is going to become a membranous structure. It is not going to develop and forming into a muscular structure by myogenic incorporation. Then this membranous diaphragm is known as eventuration of the diaphragm. So we will discuss one by one. So here, what is the congenital diaphragmatic hernia? This is the hernia which is a defect in the posterolateral wall of the diaphragm. So whenever there is a posterolateral defect of the diaphragm, that is known as congenital diaphragmatic hernia. This is because of the defective formation, or there is a defective fusion of the pleuroperitoneal membrane with the diaphragm, with that of the septum transversum and dorsal mesentery of esophagus. So actually this is because of the incomplete fusion of the pleuroperitoneal membrane with rest of the structure, leaving a big defect in its posterolateral aspect. So that is leading to the herniation of the abdominal contents into the thoracic cavity. So why this is happening? Because now, because of this gap, the peritoneal and pleural cavities are connected with each other, and it is resulting in the herniation of the abdominal viscera into the thoracic cavity. So these viscera can be the stomach and the spleen, the liver, and other structures. They can move inside into the thoracic cavity, and it is mostly occur in the left side. So what will happen when these structure will move into the thoracic cavity? Definitely they will cause pressure onto the heart, moving it more ventrally, and also they are compressing the. So now here you can see that congenital diaphragmatic hernia, in which you can see along the posterolateral aspect of the diaphragm and mostly towards the left side. This defect is very common, and this is very common malformation. You can say it is 1 per 2,000 newborns in which you can see this congenital anomaly, and this is because of the failure of the pleuroperitoneal membrane to close the pericardio-peritoneal canal. So that's how you can see there is the herniation of the abdominal viscera, which can enter from abdomen into that thoracic cavity. This can be the stomach, the large intestine, spleen, part of the liver, which are present in these nearby areas. So that abdominal viscera, they can push the structures present in this thoracic cavity. They are causing the pressure on the heart and compressing the lungs, and because of this compression the lungs become hypoplastic. So this is having very high mortality rate, and now you can see here again in this that in this case you can see the stomach, even this is the heart, and the stomach and most of the large intestine is going to be present here in the thoracic region. So that is a very life-threatening condition, which is this congenital diaphragmatic hernia. And this congenital diaphragmatic hernia, that is the next one is the congenital hiatal hernia. That is the herniation of the abdominal viscera or some of the part of the stomach through the large esophageal hiatus. So that esophageal opening which is present in diaphragm, if it is large enough that it can pull, it can push that stomach inside into the thoracic cavity, and also if there is a shortening of esophagus, then at that time the stomach can move, is known as congenital hiatal hernia. So in this condition, in this picture you can see that if there is issue and there is a problem in the hiatus of esophagus, and through this structure if there is the herniation of the abdominal viscera, we label them the hiatal hernia. Number 2, there is the opening which is present anteriorly here between the sternal and the costal heads of the diaphragm. So if this opening is large enough, as you have seen that this is known as the sinus of Morgagni, and this is for the passage of the superior epigastric vessels, the branch of the internal thoracic artery with its terminal branch which enters through this gap and enters into the abdominal cavity. So this sinus of Morgagni, which is a opening present between the sternal and costal heads of the diaphragm, if it is large enough for the herniation, that is known as parasternal hernia. At that time we label that hernia, that is a parasternal hernia. And here in this picture you can easily see that this is the congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Along the posterolateral aspects, it is also compressing that lung tissue, making it hypoplastic, and this is because of the failure of fusion of the pleuroperitoneal membrane, or the defective development of that pleuroperitoneal membrane, which is unable to fill that gap, which is the gap through pericardioperitoneal canal. So you must remember these three types of the defects during the development of diaphragm. So here it's showing you the chest x-ray, in which you can see that along with that lung tissue, you can also see that gut which is present into the thoracic cavity. So the presence of this gut into that thoracic cavity is suggestive of the congenital diaphragmatic hernia. Now, what is the eventuation of the diaphragm? As I have told you, if there is failure of muscular tissue from the lateral body wall to migrate and extend into the pleuroperitoneal membrane, that it makes it a complete membranous structure, and because of that membranous structure, that abdominal viscera, they balloon out towards the thoracic cavity. So this is not a complete herniation, rather this is the ballooning of the membranous pleuroperitoneal membrane, which is now making a balloon-like structure with the abdominal viscera. So there is superior displacement of abdominal viscera, which are surrounded by the membranous part of the diaphragm, making a pocket around the viscera. So here you can see that this structure, that is the eventuation of the diaphragm, in which this membranous component of pleuroperitoneal membrane is present. So this is because of the failure of ingrowth of the muscular tissue into the pleuroperitoneal membrane. So this remain membranous and it is ballooning out into the thoracic cavity. It is also causing pressure on the lung, as you can see. So this is eventuation of the diaphragm. So that is not a true herniation, rather this is covered by a membranous pocket of the diaphragmatic tissue. Now, as you have seen the ventral body wall that is formed in the previous lecture, so some of its defects and clinical correlates were left. So today I'm also going to discuss them with you. As you have seen that there was the ventral ingrowth and ventral extension of the lateral body wall tissue to make the anterior body wall. I will show you in the next slide. So what are these defects? If there is a failure of ventral body wall to form completely, this is ectopia cordis, in which the thoracic cavity, in which the anterior thoracic wall is not formed. It is there is a defect leading to the heart which is present outside. Gastroschisis is the condition in which the abdominal wall is not formed completely and the gut tissue and intestines are present outside the abdominal wall. If there is incomplete formation of the pelvic wall, anterior pelvic wall, then the bladder, urinary bladder, can be exposed outside, or there is all the cloacal structure, they are present outside on the surface of the newborn baby. So this is bladder or cloacal exstrophy. And omphalocele, actually this is the failure of physiological herniation, in which the gut tube is going to enter into the umbilical cord, but they fail to return back into the intestine, into the abdominal cavity. So that is omphalocele. So here the picture to show you that how the laterally these wall, which is the somatopleury, the ectoderm, along with the parietal or somatic layer of the lateral plate mesoderm, these lateral body folds, they migrate ventrally and then they meet together anteriorly in the midline, and when they fused, they are making a complete body wall. So this is only a cut section showing you as only a single area, but if there is a incomplete fusion of this anterior wall, if it is in the thoracic region, then heart is exposed to the outside, known as ectopia cordis. If it is in the abdominal region, making gastroschisis, and if there is a defect in the anterior body wall formation in the pelvic region, this is cloacal or bladder exstrophy. So here in these pictures you can see very easily the ventral body wall defects which are affecting now the thoracic region and abdominal region, and this is the bladder exstrophy, and that is the bladder and cloacal exstrophy in the pelvic region. So here in the thoracic region, as the lateral body folds, they are failed to fuse in the midline, then you can see that heart is exposed to the surface. So heart is present on the thoracic region superficially, and this is due to the failure of the lateral body folds to fuse in midline. And sometimes this defect, it begins at the caudal end of the sternum, at the lower part of the sternum, and sometimes it is combination of abnormalities and multiple defects which are known as Cantrell pathology. In Cantrell pathology, in this it includes multiple defects. Number one is ectopia cordis. Number two is the defect in the anterior portion of the diaphragm. So there is a defect in diaphragm as well, and there is absence of the pericardium on the heart. There is defect in the sternum, and as well as it is having associated defect in anterior abdominal wall, having associated gastroschisis or omphalocele. So that is a combination of 5 defects making it Cantrell pathology. So this is ectopia cordis. Here you can see this is a gastroschisis, and this gastroschisis and omphalocele you have studied before as well in general embryology, I hope. So gastroschisis, in this case, the intestines and all the abdominal viscera, they are exposed to the surface. They are not covered with any membrane, and they are directly exposed into the amniotic cavity and with the amniotic fluid, which is having corrosive effect on it. And this is a defect very commonly seen 3.5 per 10,000 births, and you can detect this defect earlier by checking the alpha fetoproteins. In this case, there is raised level of alpha fetoproteins. Here you have seen this bladder exstrophy, and this is showing you the cloacal exstrophy. So this is again because of the failure in the anterior abdominal wall closure in pelvic region, and this is a bit less severe defects which can be repaired by the surgery. They can be corrected. And this bladder exstrophy, that is also associated in males with the epispadias. There is associated epispadias as well, in which there is a opening at the dorsum of the penis. So that urethral opening, there is a split here, and that is commonly present on the dorsal side. In urogenital defects, during the development of urogenital structure, you will study them, the complete detail of epispadias. So bladder exstrophy is associated. Here in the omphalocele, you have seen that in this case there is actually the problem in the reversal of the physiological herniation. So when there is this physiological herniation which occurs between 6th to 10th week of the intrauterine life, but the gut tubes, they are unable to return back into the abdominal cavity. They remain here in the umbilical cord, and it is covered by the reflection of a membrane, that is a membrane of the amnion. Here you can see they are covered by a membrane, that is a reflection from the amnion. So they are not going to expose to the amniotic fluid. It is 2.5 per 10,000 births these malformations can be seen, and these are sometimes associated with the elevated alpha fetoprotein level as well. So these gastroschisis and omphalocene can be detected by raised level of the alpha fetoproteins.